Hello, fellas. New Harry Potter, not Harry Potter, Wizarding World, whatever. It's the fucking Harry Potter franchise. Harry Potter Hogwarts Legacy trailer, PlayStation Showcase came out today, about 14 minutes of gameplay. I will definitely do a video on that tonight or tomorrow. I have some thoughts. But what's on my mind right now is I was perusing the internet. I was perusing good Sir NeoGAF's site, Mr. NeoGAF. I like that site. I don't agree with a lot of people on the site, but I don't know when that became a rule that you have to agree with everybody in order to engage with them. But here we go. This was on there talking about the Harry Potter. Somebody grabbed a link to Imran Khan. He's a games journalist. He used to work for Game Informer. Now he works for Fanbyte, I think they're called. Here's what he says. He says, I've decided I don't want to engage in the marketing of Hogwarts Legacy, so I won't. Instead, this is Imran goes on, here's a list of trans charities and ways to help in Texas, where, of course, I hope you know there's a horribly offensive, awful, damaging piece of legislation where parents who are supportive of, and what that looks like is specific, but I don't have all the details other than to say if they help their child transition, they can be brought up on charges of child abuse, okay? That's going on in Texas. It's horrible. This will be the way I cover this game pre-release from now on, says Imran. Okay, so of course, you know, it's going to kick the hornet's nest. Do you kick it? Because it's in the tree. I don't know how that works, but he's stirring things up. He's stirring things up like an old so-and-so. So Imran comes in here. He says this. Now, NeoGAF, which tends to lean more conservative than not, here's what they have to say. To no surprise, you know, this guy says it's pathetic. This guy, Nick Unashi, says he's not a games journalist then. He's a trans activist who happens to play games. You can't be both? Can't be both? Stunning and brave, the pleasure says, I think sarcastically. Good Sir Brian, our good friend Brian, says, the only question I have is how many copies should I buy? What a dick, Brian. The minute you come back to NeoGAF, you get unbanned at NeoGAF, you go right back into the fucking mosh pit, you old so-and-so. This guy calls him an idiot. This guy's like, you're not a real journalist. Now, of course I have a thought on that. I want to share that. But I do want to get, this is kind of a tiny elephant in the room. I didn't know this. Fanbyte is owned by Tencent. I learned that from reading this Abriel_GN. And then there's also this Johnny Bates guy. He says, it's pretty interesting to see someone literally working for Tencent, trying so hard to sit on a moral high horse. For those who missed the memo, Tencent owns Fanbyte. I did not know that. But it's a good point. It's like, again, there's a very, you know, not just because, but, you know, these are both tragedies that are very, very different. In China, the Uyghurs are being allegedly, which I think most people agree with, and in terms of the news is accurate, they agree with that. The news is accurate. Basically, genocide happening over there with these sort of learning camps. Over 1 million of these Muslim folks have vanished into the camps, and a lot have come out, but a lot have come out and they've been totally indoctrinated, and some have never come out. And they never will come out because they're dead. And then Tencent obviously is a huge company in the world, but certainly in China, and they are, you know, they're beholden to their government masters, and it's hard to support companies like that for me. Okay, so I think this guy has a point. It's like, it's weird that you are. It's not that it's weird, but it seems, you know, if you're going to be that kind of journalist that's going to put your money where your mouth is, why is this issue more important than that, right? They're both really important issues. So I get it. It's a good point. But I will say on the specific thing about Hogwarts Legacy, I mean, I you know, as a parent to a trans kid, and as somebody who knows trans people, has a couple of trans friends in my life, you know, I struggle with this because J.K. Rowling, who invented Harry Potter and all that, she's never come out against trans people, but her views on trans folks are ignorant, in my opinion, and hurtful and harmful. But, you know, she has a right to have her opinion. I don't give a fuck. I mean, I only care if she's hurting people specifically, and she's just got an opinion that I happen to think is dumb. But anyway, so a lot of the trans community and trans allies are like, hey, let's not give her any more of our money. And I think that's a fair thing to do and a fair thing to want to do if you disagree with someone. Why would you pay them? And in this case, it's interesting because the thing that reminded me of was the BFG, the movie from Spielberg. So BFG was written, I'm a huge fan of this author, Roald Dahl, who also did Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and I think did Fabulous Mr. Fox, and wonderful I read all the books to my kids when they were little. Thus they were kids. But he's was a well-known anti-Semite. He openly admitted that he was an anti-Semite. And when they asked Spielberg about it, when the movie was coming out, who obviously, or famously, I guess I would say, is a Jew, he said, the book's not about that. The story's about people coming together and overcoming our differences. And, that's all he ever said on it. But clearly he was able, for whatever reason, whether you agree or not, to kind of get past whatever reservations he may have had, working with material that was brought into the world by someone who clearly wouldn't have liked Spielberg because, he danced the hora or whatnot. If you don't know what that means, that's because you, unlike me, weren't raised Jewish. I was raised Jewish, but I'm not Jewish. But whatever, it doesn't matter. It's a different video. In other words, he wouldn't have liked Spielberg because he was an anti-Semite. So there's definitely a middle ground, where you can hate the artist, love the art. I asked a trans friend of mine today when I saw this, I said, tell me, what is the deal with the Harry Potter thing? Is it, if I saw the trailer of the game and I liked it, as an ally, as a parent of a trans kid, this wasn't my kid, I asked, I don't really like to bring him into that, but as a parent of a trans kid, what do you think about this? And he says to me, he's like, look, man, he says, if the money's going to a product and the product is advocating harm against trans folks, or anybody really, but specifically in this case, trans folks, he says, I would be bothered if people I knew and cared about, friends and family were supporting that. He says, but in case Harry Potter, it's not. Yeah, she's going to make a little bit of money off this, but ultimately, in fact, I asked him, I said he liked, was it the Smiths back in the 80s, Morrissey? And I asked him, I said, Morrissey's been pretty racist since his heyday in the 80s and 90s, and he's a big fan of Morrissey. I said, what about that? He says, yeah, I still listen to Morrissey. I love Morrissey's stuff, his solo stuff and his band stuff, but the Smith stuff. But that, I don't agree with him, and I certainly wouldn't pay for a record he put out that was about his racist views. And so I guess the point is, obviously, look, here's what I'll tell you, truth be told. I take my cues when certain groups take offense or certain groups are targeted from those groups. Okay, a lot of people will try to tell me I'm an idiot for not eating at Chick-fil-A. Well, you know what? Here's the deal. I have another number of gay people in my family, and they've all said to me, this is pretty shitty what they do. Not so much Chick-fil-A anymore, but the owner of Chick-fil-A. You're still giving him money, and he's donating it directly to these awful anti-trans, anti-gay groups. And in that case, it's a very direct line from my pocket to his, and from his to doing harm. In Rowling's case, she has an opinion I think is stupid. She has an opinion that trans folks think are stupid, and they're saying, or at least the one I talked to is saying, yeah, are they directly taking the money and harming trans folks with it directly, or do they just share an opinion? And I said, well, I think they just share an opinion. And so he said, well, it's, do what you want to do, but I probably will play it. I like Harry Potter. So, your mileage will vary, but it is an interesting topic, where people come down on this. I think this Imran guy, he could say, well, I don't agree, or I don't believe the stories from The World and Amnesty International about the Uyghurs and what China is doing. And so I would be consistent in my, politics, but I don't agree that that's happening. But most logical thinking people know it's happening. And in that case, it's a little interesting to go, well, you're just going to stop covering every 10-cent game? Are you going to quit your job? You probably should. But then again, you also go, hey, at least the guy's bringing attention to something important, which is, there is a very vocal and woman out there with a huge reach and a huge fan base who's saying some shit that's shitty. And she has a right to, but people should be directed to some other opinions about why what she's saying is harmful and hurtful and wrong. So anyway, that's my take on this. It's tough, man, because, you know, the more we start to tear down the walls of celebrity and people who create things that used to be only through PR we would get access to them. Now, obviously, Twitter and Instagram and all that shit. You know, you dig around for more than 5 minutes in any piece of art that you love, any piece of entertainment that you love. I'm sure you're going to find somebody influential that worked on that product that has views that you find really offensive and abhorrent and cruel. And so I think my friend has a good line on this. The idea of saying, hey, unless the money is that you're paying is directly going to harm people, or the art itself is about harming people, what are you going to do? You know, you're going to end up reading, you know, See Dick and Jane, See Spot Run, and everything else, because it's, I mean, a little more complicated, which means more people usually, which means more opinions, where you can shut yourself off and have no culture, no entertainment, because that's kind of where you would be heading. And I liked that view, obviously, because it's easy for me. I don't have to sacrifice anything. But I do sacrifice my Chick-fil-A French fries, which I grew up eating in the South, and I love, but fuck them, because they're awful, terrible homophobes, and they should go fuck themselves. All right, I hope you're well. See you soon. Bye.